All right, we're back with another Atmos gaming video. Going to open another one of these precons. We know but Jinx before when I was yet but a novice at the rules. Since then, I finally just dug deep and read through the entire complete rule set, core rule set, and patch notes. And then I went to a release event on Sunday after a wedding, and I got there a little too late to participate, but I actually ended up judging it. Or helping with questions and actually responding to judge calls, because I do have a pretty good handle on the rules now. And there is some pretty nifty timing, sort of like rule decisions. The game is like more regimented than Magic, but there's some like timing idiosyncrasies kind of in a Magic way that you can really eke out advantages if you understand it. So I'm still, obviously this is still early days. Please do not persecute me entirely if I get something wrong. But if I get an example of one of those sort of interesting timing rules, I'll bring it up as we go through this. So this will hopefully be faster because now, you know, I'm more versed on what's going on. So this is your legend here, Lee Sin. This is the build around. So your legend starts in your legend zone. It defines the domain, which is the colors or the runes of your deck. Again, your deck is a minimum of 40 cards, but it looks like tournaments will be locked exactly on 40 cards. So no more, no less. This does not count towards it. It just like you open the game with it and it just stays in play. And so far there's nothing that can interact with it. It doesn't seem like there will be. They typically have just an effect, either a triggered effect or an activated ability. And indeed this one is 1 and exhaust him. So that's 1 energy of any color. All energy is colorless. And you can buff a friendly unit. So a buff is just a generic like +1 might. But it's like it's actually kind of like a token that gets put on it, almost like a token enchantment, if you're in Magic terms, or a token aura, I should say. But you can only wear 1 of these at a time, which is exactly like those token auras, whose name I forget, but like the one that Monstrous Rage puts on, right? You can only have 1 of them on at a time. Same with buffs. So anyway, pretty cool. Just kind of keeps your team buffed up. So then next, as a good segue, so again, this does not count to your 40 cards. Your champion unit, which you also can start in the champion zone, does count towards your total 40 cards. So this really isn't like a commander in the sense where when this dies, it doesn't go back to the champion zone, even though it starts there. It's more like a companion in Magic, like the OG companions, where it's basically just like starting in your hand for free, your opening hand, face up. And the rule is that it has to be the exact same character, the exact same name as your legend, your declared champion unit. You can play other champion units in your deck. They just can't be your champion, aka they can't start in the champion zone. So this is a 6 energy, 6 might. Accelerate basically means it comes into play ready, aka it has haste, and it costs 1 energy and recycling a rune. So recycling a rune means you actually take a rune that's in play and you put it on the bottom of your rune deck, which is a 12-card deck that's separate from your main deck. And you channel 2 runes, which means you basically get 2 lands a turn every turn. So that's how this kind of mixed cost of both tapping runes for energy and then recycling them really is a really cool resource system. It's almost like exerting a rune or like sacrificing a land in Magic, which would be a really steep cost, but since you're getting 2 a turn and it's a separate deck, it's guaranteed. It's just a really cool resource system. So this says other buff friendly units at my battlefield have +2 might. So if he gets a buff, it doesn't do anything for him. I mean, he does go up 1 power or 1 might to 7, but a real significant buff basically turns the +1 buff to a +3 buff total if they're all at the same battlefield. So that's pretty cool. Accelerating is also good. Haste is pretty strong in this game. So in this game, you can play units to any zone that you control. So the zones are, each player has a base zone, and then there's the 2 battlefield zones. In multiplayer, there'll be 3 battlefield zones. So if you control a battlefield, aka you've conquered it or you're actively holding it, you can actually play champions to that zone, typically exhausted. If you're doing that, there's really no reason to accelerate him, because if you're already playing him in a battlefield, him being ready would allow him to use a tap ability, which he doesn't have, or would allow him to exhaust to move. But he doesn't have ganking, so ganking is what's required to move between battlefields. So you would just move him from a battlefield back to your ready zone. So if you were to play him at a battlefield you control, it would almost always be exhausted, not accelerated, at which point he's still providing defense and his buff to anyone else that happens to be there. I said this was going to be shorter, but here I am rambling. Another neat thing I found when actually playing is it's a very strong tempo play to like conquer a battlefield so that you're controlling it, and then play characters to that battlefield to like bolster the defense. So like you accrue some units in your base, and then like on the turn you use your units in your base to conquer a battlefield by moving there and winning combat, and then you can then play to that battlefield to bolster the defense. It's pretty strong. So Udyr, we actually saw this in the pack opening. So again, this costs 6 energy, but also requires recycling a body rune. That's that rune color, and it's 6 might. And it is a champion unit. Again, we cannot use it as the champion because Udyr is not our legend, it's Lee Sin. And so he actually has an activated ability where he can spend his buff, basically consume a buff that's on him, and convert it into this toolbox. Shooting a unit for 2 at a battlefield, stunning a unit at a battlefield, which means it doesn't deal damage the next combat. Ready Me, which can be used to, give him haste, or, otherwise allow him to do 2 things in a turn, and give him ganking. So, yeah, pretty cool card. A lot of good utility. Another interesting thing to point out is like you will see a lot of direct damage effects, say at a battlefield. There are also some that are not qualified in that way. It just says like deal 6 damage to a unit. So that's important because like your base is like kind of safe, insofar as a lot of direct damage and removal does say at a battlefield. Again, there are some that are unconditional, but those are going to carry a cost premium. Mistfall. So here's another rare. This is a gear. It's 3 cost gear. It's like an artifact of magic. When you buff a friendly unit, you may recycle. Whenever you see a rune, like an actual rune symbol like that, that always means recycle, not tap for energy. You may, I think this is actually called the power, rune power. You may consume a power of the body rune and exhaust this to ready it. Oh, that's pretty cool. So this is basically like you can give haste. So like basically, since Lee Sin's ability costs 1 energy and this recycles a rune, that's typically the cost of accelerating something. Like we saw here, the cost to accelerate on Lee Sin is 1 energy and a recycle. That's pretty typical from cards that we've seen. So this kind of turns with Lee Sin, basically giving everything accelerate, as well as a buff. So this is a spell that costs 1, and you have to recycle 1 calm rune. I believe that's green, and it says move an enemy unit. So here's another quick timing rant. God, this is gonna still be a long video. So there's 3 different spell speeds in this game. There is so in Magic there's just 2, right? There's sorcery and instant. Like all abilities are instants, right? Typically, unless otherwise stated, like on cards. So this game is different. There's 3 spell speeds. The slowest of which is just spell with no other ability text here. And this is actually also the spell speed of activated and triggered activated abilities like Lee Sin. So activated abilities like Lee Sin in Riftbound are actually the slowest spell speed. And that means like basically only played on your turn during your main phase, basically like a true sorcery in Magic. Then there's spells that have something that called action, as additional keyword here, which we'll see those. And those are also sorceries. However, they can also be played during showdowns, which is basically like the initial phase of combat. Once a battlefield becomes contested, aka there are units there. Actually, they don't even have to be units there. Whenever someone moves their units to an open or occupied battlefield, a showdown phase starts. And during the showdown phase, you can play actions or reactions. So even on your opponent's turn, if you have a spell that says action, you can play them during the showdown phase. So that's like spell speed 2, and then, or that's like instant slash sorcery, and then there's true instants called reactions, which when we get one of those, I'll describe another little idiosyncrasy. Also, there's max of 3 cards per deck, not 4, so a little more variety. So here's another spell, Challenge. Cost 2 and recycle a body rune. Choose a friendly unit and enemy unit. They each deal damage equal to their mice to each other. So this is straight up a bite effect. One really interesting thing about this game, another idiosyncrasy, cool how every card we're getting one of these. In Runeterra, damage clears at the end of turn, heals at the end of turn, just like in Magic. However, it also heals after every combat. So you can you can contest the battlefield, win combat, and let's say your biggest unit survives out of that, it will full heal at the conclusion of that combat still during your turn. So then you could still play this challenge as a bite effect. However, if you played this challenge during the showdown phase as an action, see this is an action, which means it can be played during a showdown phase, it will have that damage on it during the combat. So the damage, it would basically be additive, the damage that it suffers in combat as well as this damage, so it would be much more likely to die. So it's kind of interesting how you would play this in an action sense. But it's also any friendly unit, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily a unit that is even involved in the contested battlefield. You could use a unit at your other battlefield, to duel during the showdown phase. So you don't have to make it stack damage. But since damage works that way, you can't do the thing in Magic where basically you go through combat and then after combat you shoot the creature with a shock or lightning bolt or whatever to finish it off. In this game you have to lead with direct damage, right? Perhaps during the showdown phase as an action, so that the damage actually adds and actually kills the creature or the unit. So we got 3 of these. It's a pretty good card. Stand United, a spell, hidden action. So it's almost like they ordered this so that it's a different learning rule as we go through. So this is a 3-cost spell. It's an action, so again, it can only be played during your turn or during the showdown phase of combat, which is that first phase of combat. And another tidbit about that showdown phase is it just goes back and forth between the players until both players pass. So hidden is interesting. You can avoid paying its cost and only recycle a rune in order to play this face down. Now, you can only play it face down, hidden, on a battlefield you control. So you have to be controlling a battlefield, which you will certainly do during the game where you are dramatically losing. And then you can react with it later for 0, which means flip it up. But notice it says react. So making this hidden actually upgrades the timing from just an action to a reaction, which is more or less a true instant. And it costs 0 to flip it up. Now, one of the reasons they kind of have to do that is because if you lose control of that battlefield, anything that you have that's hidden there will fizzle. It'll just go away. But that'll really never happen because you can always just react with it, before that happens. So let's see what this does. It says buff a friendly unit. Buffs give an additional +1 might to friendly units this turn. Cool. So it gives a buff, but it's actually +2 might instead of 1, and then also makes everyone else that has a buff get an additional +1 might. So that's a pretty strong combat trick, especially when it effectively costs 0. Because when you think from an energy cost, this is net 0, right? Recycling is not actually energy. I mean, it's technically more costly because you're getting rid of the rune, and then you flip it up for 0. So this is net 0. Oh, also about hidden cards, you can't hide it and react with it that turn. It has to at least be the next turn, which would be your opponent's turn, or any subsequent turn from that. So since this is an action and a reaction kind of together, let me point out another interesting timing aspect. So when you're in the showdown, you can play actions and showdowns, right? But actions are still not reactions, even during the showdown phase. So I'll actually mock out a version of this probably for a short, but the idea is so the attacker gets first priority to play an action. Let's say they have a 4 might that's attacking, and they play an action like this that basically buffs it 2, right? It gives it +2. If I have a reaction that allows me to deal 4 damage again, reactions are like instant speed. I could respond to this Stand United that they played as an action. I could respond to it with my reaction to shoot the creature, and kind of blow them out. Get like the typical Magic 2-for-1. You targeted your creature with a combat trick, I kill it in response, it's a blowout. That does work. However, if I have an action that deals 4 damage, I can play that during the showdown phase, but I cannot react to the pump. And again, the attacker has initiative. So if they lead with that pump, then I cannot respond with my action. Now, let's say I had an action that did 6 damage. So same situation, they have 4 might, they led with this pump to make it 6. Then I say, okay, that resolves. Then it's my turn to play actions. I can then attempt to deal 6 to it. If they had another one of these, they could not then respond with it because it is just an action. But if there was a reaction that pumped, then they could respond to my removal spell by pumping it further with a reaction. So I think that's going to take a while for maybe even some Magic players to get the hang of, but like you have different spell speeds even during the showdown phase between actions and reactions, and how they interplay is quite important. So there is a rant. Hopefully I'll remember to make a short out of that. So we just see these stock basically 2/2s with upside. I've decided I'm just going to start calling these like this is a 2/2 or a 2/2 for 2, but everything is just symmetrical health and power in this game, power and defense. So this is a 2/2 with some minor upside. While it's defending, not attacking, it gets +1 might. So it's like a 3/3 for 2 basically when defending. And there's kind of ones that are like when it's attacking. There's a Poro that also, is a 3/3. So when you play me, buff another friendly unit. Like this is a pretty solid 2-drop. Like again, vanilla 2/2 is whatever. But like just getting a buff, which obviously we've seen Udyr consumes about it, like various things care about buffs in this. Like this is just solid. It does have to be another friendly unit, so it can't target itself. Otherwise that would be straight broken. So 3 of those. While I'm attacking or defending alone, I have +2 might. So like obviously a 3/2 is like really overcosted, but a 3/4 is not. So it wants to be doing its thing on its own, but that kind of works with this deck, right? Because you're more like stacking buffs. So you're kind of like, oh geez, what is that called in Magic? Megatroning, Ultroning in this deck. So it kind of works. So this is a 3/3. When you play me, ready another unit. Pretty solid, can, again, because you're stacking buffs, can let like a real beater do 2 actions. Also can be like, pseudo haste, basically. If you double spell on a turn, you can use this to give the other guy haste. So not too shabby. Again, 3/3 with upside. So here we go. This is not only, actions aren't the only things that have hidden. So this is a unit, obviously, that has hidden. And again, you'll see that basically, one really cool thing about this hidden mechanic is the fact that it, by and large, just costs a rune of any color recycling and then a 0 cost to reveal. Shows that, yeah, there's a bit of a delay trigger here, but there's also hidden knowledge that's effective and upgrading the speed to a react, basically giving this creature flash. But it basically shows that recycling a rune is worth roughly 2 to 3 energy, because you'll see hidden 2-cost spells or 3-cost spells kind of make this equalization. So something to keep in mind moving forward is at least how the developers think the game is balanced. Brightwater Bully, it's a 6/6. While I'm buffed, I have ganking. So ganking, again, means that they can move from battlefield to battlefield instead of having to go back to the base, which is the typical requirement. So, again, just kind of a generic beater, but it wears, a buff well. Oh, this is pretty cool. Speaking of wearing buffs well, Stormclaw Ursine. So just 7 energy. We haven't seen very many things in this deck like require recycling, and I think that's what you'll see is like decks that require less recycling will play more high energy stuff, right? Because you're channeling 2 runes a turn, so you can get to this stuff pretty quickly and play it consistently as long as you're not recycling too much. Which again just adds really cool tempo and decisions to the game in both deck building and actual like play execution, because like not recycling is almost like pseudo ramp because it's like an implied cost in the design. Anyway, I like it. I think it's cool. It's got legs. So 7 cost here. It's a 6 might. And when you play me, channel 1 rune exhausted. So this guy actually, slightly ramps you, which is kind of wild at 7. But again, we're really playing beaters here. Body, which is what this rune color is. They like their beaters. And this is tank. So this is basically like taunt and Hearthstone, more or less. It has to be assigned combat damage first. So obviously wears buffs well and can help, more weenies or like maybe even a go wide strategy. This could be pretty good. Just playing a couple of those because it's expensive. Here we go, another unit. This is actually an uncommon. So 4 for a 3, so better have a good ability. When you play me, you may spend a buff to buff and ready me. So basically consume a buff that's on someone else to give this a buff and ready, which is, basically giving it haste. So like a 4/4 with haste, like that's definitely above curve. So this is quite good. I mean, it is taking a buff to do it, but still, I think that's worth it. So this is quite good, but you really don't ever want to play this unless you have a buff to consume. It's basically non-playable. But again, your legend can poop out a buff every turn if you wanted to. So it's kind of up to you to make sure that happens. So Monastery of Harana. So this is one of your battlefield. So the rules about battlefield is you start the game. If you're playing best of 3, sorry, let me rewind. In deck building, every deck needs to have 3 battlefields as part of the build. If you're playing best of 1, you just randomize them and pick one. Both players do that. If you're playing best of 3, you actually choose one of your 3 battlefields for the first game, like in secret, and both you and your opponent reveal them at the same time. And then each game, you have to pick one that you haven't used, right? So if you do go to game 3, you'll be using your last one. So that's some pretty cool strategy. And they basically all have some status effect. So when you conquer here, you may spend a buff to draw 1. So obviously this deck would be interested in that. Converting a buff, which is basically 1 energy cost because of our legend, into a draw is real solid. Let me give you some gas. Here's another one. When you conquer here, ready 2 runes at the end of turn. So this can allow you to play actions or reactions on your opponent's turn. Again, actions only during showdown phase. Reactions in response to anything. So that's maybe where I'll just jump in here randomly and mention how reactions are different than instants and Magic, is that reactions have to respond to something. Any trigger, like combat starting, any spell being played, any unit being played, but it has to be in response to something. And the changing of phases is not something. So like in Magic, you're constantly passing priority as you move between phases. Not so in this game. Something actually has to enter the stack, or the chain as it's called in this game, in order for you to have the ability to play a reaction. So like if your opponent somehow has no triggers, like no beginning of their turn triggers and no end step triggers, and just like draws a card and passes, you cannot play a reaction on their turn. Like you can't, there's no like end of your turn, play this reaction. Nope. When you hold here, draw 1. Okay. That's pretty intense. This is like the best rare in the game here in the background, which is like very Ari-ish, Fox. So yeah, this is strong. So holding means basically you control this battlefield at the start of your turn, which is a good thing to have because it also scores you a victory point in the first 8 wins, but it also draws you a card, so win more. All right, so here's a 4/4, and when I'm buffed, I have an additional 1 might. So just solid, like this. Obviously, if you do it on turn 5, because you want to use another energy here, this is a 6, a 5/6 or a 6 for 5, which is quite solid. I think maybe saying 6 for 5 is better. Still trying to figure out the exact way that I want to use words for this game. So this is just a vanilla 10 for 9. Maybe that's good. 10 for 9. Solid, right? Surely just 2 of them. Yeah, just 2 of them. Very expensive, but again, we're not recycling much. Haven't been a lot of rune symbols here to recycle. So here's a spell, and it's a reaction. So instant, true instant. Give a unit +2 might this turn, draw a card. This, I think, is like the best pump that I've seen. Like it's a true instant, and you're redrawing out of it. So like this can get you out of reaction damage spells. This is just a solid pump, and can devastatingly win some combats. So yeah, 3 of those, quite good. 2-cost gear, Mask of Foresight. When a friendly unit attacks or defends alone, give it +1 might this turn. So this just seems like, okay, again, you're kind of Ultroning, Voltroning, stacking your buffs or whatever, so this is like better than it would normally be, but it's just still kind of blah. So these are tokens. There are tokens in this game. So far, I think we've only seen 2, or I've only seen 2. These recruits, but that's because the other side are buffs. I don't think we really saw anything really making recruits, but these are the buffs that you just slot on. Remember, unit may have no more than 1 buff at a time. And then what we have left is our 12 runes, 6 of each. So this is a separate deck that you shuffle and randomize. And the cool thing is, boom, the backs of these are white. The back of the decks are blue. The back of your battlefields are black because they don't go in your deck, and your legend back is black as well. So well thought out design there to keep the separate parts of your deck separate. And yeah, this deck seems fun. This is a little bit more Timmy. Honestly, I'm going to be shocked if I think any deck is as good as the Jinx deck. Like, the Jinx deck just seems pretty fire. Supports my gameplay choice, like Graveyard's Energies, more interactions, redrawing, dumping your hand. That's the sort of thing that Jinx does, which I'm into. This is more, your Ultron-y stack big stuff, which is certainly fun. It's got some cool energies, right, with the consuming of buffs into toolboxes or, some other buffs or card draw and stuff. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I like this deck. I think all these decks are quite well designed, especially for being, just the very, very beginning of the game. And just as we went through the cards, right, we saw it was like layering concepts just in reading the cards, like in the order that they were in the deck. So I think that's also a good sign. But yeah, Jinx is still my preference with this out of these 2 decks. But we'll do Victor next and see if we get like that better. Oh, before we go, let's end with cracking the bonus pack. Each pre-release deck comes with a bonus pack. As well, they all should, in order to seed the initial addiction to ripping packs. So what do we got here? And we'll point out if it would be good in this deck. So this sets the colors. 3-cost spell. It's an action. It's only your turns or showdowns. If an opponent's score is within 3 points of the victory score, so 8 is the victory score for single player, 11 for multiplayer, so that'd be 5, 6, 7, or 8, they win. This costs 2 less. Cool. Draw 1 and channel a rune exhausted. Yeah, like, I'm not sure. So this is kind of an interesting card, right? Because, like, I'm not sure I'm down to pay 3 for this normally. And I'm not sure if my opponent is, like, about to win, which is the implication of the first text, that I'm really interested in doing this at all. I probably am more interested in answers. Certainly there could be, like, maybe a control-y deck where it's like, this is like a get ahead more, just snowball. Like, you let them get to 5 and then they never score again because you're control, but not super high on it. This is just a good bread and butter card. It's just a 5 for 5 that you can accelerate for the typical 1 energy and recycling of a rune. When you play a gear ready me, 3 for 3. It's just fine. As you play me, you may recycle a rune as an additional cost. If you do, draw 1. Seems decent in the late game, probably more than the early game because you don't want to stunt your growth too much, but seems kind of neat. When I attack, give me +2 might if there is a ready enemy unit here. So here being where it's attacking. If there's a ready enemy unit here. That's interesting. That's not like super typical, but definitely happens in the course of a game, in which case this is a 7 for 5, which is strong. 5 for 5 is just fine. Size Scout, so it's a 5 for 6, so overcosted, but it has Scry 1. That's what Vision 1 is, literally Scry. Look at the top card, you can recycle it, which means put it on the bottom. And you can play her to an open battlefield, though. So that's kind of the advantage there, is you can just, if a battlefield is unoccupied, which happens at the beginning of the game, or if combat results in like both sides eliminating each other, then you didn't successfully conquer it and no one owns it anymore. It's then open. You can play this directly to it. But I would honestly, I think this is maybe in one of the decks or something. I would not play this card, I don't think. This card I do think is good. So this is Order. Unfortunately does not go in our deck, but we probably play it. It's a 1 for 2, which is definitely overcosted. However, when it dies, you channel a rune Exhausted. So a little bit of ramp on death. Don't hate that. Here's our battlefield. So the way that, I shouldn't say here's our battlefield. I don't think there's a battlefield in every pack, but you go through, I think there's like 8 commons, then 3 uncommons, then foil slot, then double rare slot, and then rune slot. So if you full Yahtzee, you get like a foil rare or higher, rare or epic, and then, you know, you get your 2 rare slots, and then in the rune slot, you could get an alternate art rune, which would be an incredible pack. So let's see, this battlefield is at the start of each player's beginning phase, that player channels 1 rune. Ooh, I've not seen this one. That's intense. Wow. So you get 3 runes a turn instead of 2. So really helping those ramp strategies. That's a compelling battlefield. I'm just doing it all the time. Wow. Honestly, didn't think something like that would exist. So this is a 4 for 4, but you also have to recycle a body rune. And when you play me, buff 2 other friendly units. That seems strong. Like, you certainly need some targets for this, but it's a lot of stats for 4. I mean, you are having to recycle 1, but that's the sort of value you get out of it. So here is our 3rd uncommon. So foil slots next, and this is a 2 cost. You have to recycle an Order rune, and it's an action, and you may kill a gear, draw 1. So I guess that's also your opponent's, you know, or yours if you have some reason to. So this is like kind of like a sideboard card, right? Like an anti-gear sideboard card. It does just redraw, but I mean, you're having to recycle, so like you're not truly just redrawing. Yeah, could be good. So here's our foil. Oh, Disintegrate. It's Annie. Annie's E. So it costs 4. It's a spell. It's an action. It deals 3 to a unit at a battlefield. If this kills it, draw 1. This is just objectively worse than this other oh, it doesn't recycle. So there's a common that costs 3 and recycles a Fury rune, and it does 4 damage to a unit at a battlefield. Draw 1, just straight up. So it deals 1 more damage, guarantees the draw, and costs 1 less. But it does have to recycle a rune, which is, you know, a pretty significant cost. So this still seems decent. I'd be more high on this if it was a true reaction, right? So I could blow out a pump spell, which we just kind of went over. This can't really do, but you're likely to kill something and get a draw out of this. Our first rare is Tide Turner. Opened one of these previously. So this is a 2 for 2, and it can be hidden. So this is where, like I said, it's either 2 or 3 costs are what equivalize hiding and then getting to react for 0 by recycling a rune of any color. When you play me, you may choose a friendly unit, move me to its location and it to my original location. So this is pretty cool. We're like, you know, let's say you've got like a bunch of beaters on one of your battlefields. You somehow control both battlefields, right? Or maybe you have a beater in your base and you like just play this hidden and they're like, they go to attack, right? And you're like, oh, just kidding, flip this, switch the position of my beater in this. Kind of neat. It also triggers move effects, which are our actual effects in the game. Ooh, the Harrowing is our second rare. And it says 6 and 2 Chaos Runes to recycle, and it's just play a unit from your trash, ignoring its energy cost. You still have to pay its power cost. So this is called Rune Power. So you still have to recycle, but it's just, again, if you have discards energies like the Jinx Dex does, this is just like Reanimate. Obviously, quite a bit more expensive than Reanimate. And we just got a normal rune in our rune slot. And then that. So, not a super exciting pack, but pretty cool stuff. All right, on to the Victor Precon.